Welcome to Detachment Diaries. This channel is about situationships, emotional patterns, and personal growth. I share stories from my past, not to shame anyone, but to understand myself and learn. If you relate to patterns of attachment, ambiguity, or emotional cycles, you're in the right place. Let's be honest. At some point in your dating life, you've probably been ghosted, or you've ghosted someone. I think ghosting has become so normal in modern dating that almost everyone has experienced it in one form or another. Someone stops replying, messages suddenly go unanswered, and a conversation just disappears. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And I used to spend a lot of time asking myself, why do people ghost? Is it cowardice? Is it cruelty? Or is it just the easiest way out of an uncomfortable situation? Because the truth is, most people don't like confrontation. They don't want to have the awkward conversation where they tell someone, hey, I'm not interested anymore. Or, I don't want to see you again. Even if the other person would actually handle it just fine. So instead, they disappear. And while ghosting has happened to me a few times, there are two specific moments that really stuck with me. Not because I was heartbroken, but because they were so awkward. One of the funniest ghosting stories happened when I was living on a small island. If you've ever lived on a small island, you know one thing. Eventually, you run into each other. The social circle is tiny. The bars are the same. The people are the same. You cannot hide. So there was this guy I was casually seeing. And when I say casually, I really mean casually. We weren't dating. We weren't serious. It was more like a sneaky link situation. We would meet up sometimes, hang out, and that was it. There were no expectations. And honestly, I didn't have feelings for him. So if he wanted to stop seeing me, that would have been completely fine. We could just be normal friends, like platonic friends. And all I expected was just basic respect. Like a simple message saying, hey, I think we should stop meeting up. Or stop hooking up. We'd just be friends. That's it. But instead, one day I messaged him and he didn't reply. At first, I didn't think much about it. People get busy. Sometimes they forget to reply. But then a few hours later, something very funny happened. I went out to a bar that night and guess who I saw? Him at the same bar. And with another girl. Now imagine the situation. My message was still sitting there. Seen. No reply. And suddenly we're standing in the same room. On a tiny island where it's impossible to avoid each other. And the moment he saw me, you could see the panic in his face. He awkwardly walked over and said, hey. And I said, hi. That was it. Just two people pretending everything was normal. While my message was literally still unanswered on his phone. And to this day, 5 years later, that message is still the last message in our conversation. Looking back now, I actually find it funny. Like I could really laugh about it now. But at the time, my ego was bruised. Not because I cared about him romantically, but because ghosting can make you feel oddly embarrassed. Even when you know logically that the situation wasn't serious, it still feels disrespectful. Another ghosting story happened on that same island, but this time it was a tourist situation. We were both there as a tourist. I wasn't staying long-term anymore. We met on that island, hung out for a couple of nights. It was fun, light, and casual. The kind of connection that often happens when people travel. You meet someone, you share a few great days together, and then eventually everyone goes back to their normal life. So when I left the island, I sent him a message saying something simple. I told him, "Hey, it was really fun hanging out with you. I'd love to keep in touch." And then nothing. He saw the message, but he never replied. Scene zoned. We stayed mutuals on Instagram, but that message was never answered. And at the time, I remember feeling slightly offended. Not devastated, just confused. Because I thought to myself, it would have taken 5 seconds to reply. Even just, yeah, it was fun too. That's it. But instead, silence. And over time, I started noticing something. When dating casually, ghosting is actually very common, especially when the connection isn't very deep. Sometimes people just let things slowly fade out. They stop replying, you stop replying, and eventually the conversation just dies naturally. And that's actually different from ghosting. Because when something fizzles out mutually, there's no real expectation anymore. Both people just move on. But ghosting feels different when one person is still making an effort. When someone asks you out again or sends a thoughtful message and you completely disappear. That's when it feels a bit disrespectful. For a long time, I used to say something very strongly. I will never ghost anyone because I believed people deserved honesty. If I wasn't interested, I thought the respectful thing to do was just say it. And for the most part, I still believe that. But over time, my perspective became a little more nuanced because not every situation requires a formal goodbye. For example, if you're just talking on a dating app, you've never met, you've only exchanged a few messages, and the conversation dies, I don't really consider that ghosting anymore. That's just online dating. But when you've met in person, when you've spent time together, especially when intimacy is involved already, that's different. In those situations, I do believe a short explanation is the respectful thing to do. Even something simple like, "Hey, I enjoyed meeting you, but I don't feel the connection." It might feel uncomfortable to send, but it gives the other person clarity. And clarity is something ghosting completely removes. Another thing I eventually realized about ghosting is this. Sometimes people ghost because they want to leave the door open. They don't want to officially end things. They just disappear quietly. So if they ever feel like coming back later, they technically can. No breakup conversation, no final goodbye, just silence. But that kind of ambiguity can be unfair to the other person. Because while one person keeps the door slightly open, the other person is left wondering what actually happened. And that confusion can keep people emotionally stuck. Which is why I personally try not to do that to others. If I know I'm not interested, I'd rather just be clear. But at the same time, I also learned something important. Not everyone deserves a long explanation. There are situations where silence is actually okay. For example, if someone made you uncomfortable, if they crossed a boundary, if the interaction was already disrespectful, in those cases, you're not obligated to give them closure. Protecting your own peace is also valid. So now when I think about ghosting, I see it in a more balanced way. Yes, it can hurt. Yes, it can feel disrespectful. But sometimes the silence is actually an answer. And instead of chasing that answer, sometimes the healthiest thing to do is simply accept it. Not every connection needs a dramatic ending. Sometimes things just stop. And that's okay. If anything, ghosting taught me one very useful dating lesson. Pay attention to people who consistently show up. Because in modern dating, that alone is actually rare. Someone who communicates clearly, someone who follows through, someone who doesn't disappear when things get slightly uncomfortable, those people stand out. And once you've experienced enough ghosting, you start appreciating that kind of consistency a lot more.